Live again today on TikTok, YouTube, and fan base. Actually, no Facebook today. See how things are happening over on fan base. All right, it is the top of the morning here in Diani Beach, Kenya. As always, I had received a few emails asking me to discuss what it was like when I first came here and what it was that motivated me to move here and how it's been since. So we can definitely have that discussion and get into that. For me personally, and I suppose this is just anecdotal, but for me, we started coming here years ago, a little over, a little over a decade ago. And it was my uncle had married a Kenyan lady, right? I don't have like Kenyan roots or anything like that. So my uncle had married a Kenyan lady, and the wedding was in Virginia Beach, right, in the U.S. And so after the wedding, there was this kind of like, hey, if you, anybody who wants to, come through and meet the other side of the family, essentially, we're gonna make this trip, um, you know, to Africa. And so we had already been doing a bunch of due diligence in Africa, trying to figure out where we could have manufacturing set up, and where we could control our own supply chains and do all that kind of stuff. And we kept hitting brick walls. We started in Ghana, probably like most other people, and that was a non-starter. Then we went to Togo and left just as quickly. They just didn't have the infrastructure that we were looking for in that moment. Nigeria was a nightmare for us, so we went over there. Again, non-starter. Turned around, left from there. All of the northern African countries were ridiculous as well from our standpoint. Egypt was the worst. So that was a non-starter. Like Morocco was a non-starter. Bamako was pretty cool, but still didn't really have what we were looking for. Egypt non-starter. So we had been kind of putzing around the continent looking for a solid, base to kind of create this almost like a Pan African style of supply chain, right? Where at the time that was back around when Miss May's granddaughter had been killed, and so the police did it. The police chief wanted to fire that police officer, but the union was protecting them. And then, she found out that her number one supplier for her business was the number one donor for the police union. So literally, her black-owned business, the dollars from that business were the dollars that were paying to keep the cop who murdered her granddaughter on the street. So she was definitely like, super motivated, and the first person who was like, yeah, no, if it's a black-owned business, it needs a black-owned supply chain. And so she was all over that. But it took forever for us to like find the right place. And so Sierra Leone was cool, right? And we ended up setting up some clients in Sierra Leone. They just didn't have the infrastructure that we needed, or that we were looking for in that moment. But really, really cool country, really ready to work and get things done. So highly recommend. And then Seychelles was okay, except for it's an island, so then everything has to be imported, so that increases the price of everything. Same thing with Mauritius, but cool countries. Just the island thing is their only downside. So if you're doing digital business stuff like that, cool places to look at for sure. But then we got to Kenya, and it just all kind of clicked, right? So Kenya was definitely number one for us in the type of business that we were trying to do. It had a higher ease of doing business score than Luxembourg, so it had better ease of doing business scores than like European countries. Everybody spoke English, so that's helpful when you're business focused. You know what I mean? When you want like an experience, like an African experience and all that, then so be it. Learn whatever. But when it's a business and you have a runway and you got to start turning a profit within so many months or you go out of business, you don't want those type of complications slowing you down. So that was helpful. We've seen a lot of people that went to Tanzania, not realizing that they don't really speak English, and just folding out there, right? Business just flopping in 6 months. Plus, they don't have the infrastructure. I think people get enamored by like Zanzibar, I guess, which really is it's an SAR. So Zanzibar is the same thing as like Hong Kong. It's not it's not representative of the rest of the country that owns it. You know what I mean? So there's that. Um, but yeah, beyond all of that, that's how we were introduced. That's how we came out here. We were really, really happy with what we saw out here. There was a bit of history between a guy named Pio Gama Pinto and Malcolm X that I had personally run across before I came out here, which was really, really interesting because they were both assassinated around the same time in a similar manner. And Malcolm had a plan of just coming out here, period, and essentially creating a place for Black Americans out here. And that Pio Gama Pinto guy was a politician out here that I guess was working with him to make that happen. So it was a really interesting like piece of history. And then I got out here and I was like, oh shit, I see it. Like all these years later, what I mean, 60 years later or whatever, it feels like I see exactly what Malcolm saw. So that was kind of cool. So all of those things kind of influenced, our ability to come out here. But the number one factor was due diligence. The number one factor was the ease of doing business score. The number one factor was the banking score. Like the hard facts. You really don't want to do a bunch of decision making off of feelings, right? So the hard facts were really the number one thing that led us to this country in particular. And still to this day, seems like we made the right decision. Hindsight's typically 2020, so everything looks pretty good. We had some. We weren't really affiliated with them, but we knew some other business people that were doing some other things in the area, and they've all crumbled. Um, the latest one was one of the ones that went to Tanzania. Now that Tanzania passed that law that they're not allowing foreigners to open businesses in 15 different business categories, one of which is small and medium enterprise. So that really killed a lot of people off. I don't know what Tanzania never even looked like an option to me, but the feelings over facts crowd, I guess, really thought that Tanzania was a vibe and were making business decisions off of the vibe. So it was pretty crazy. But yeah, Tanzania's like crushed them now. And then some of them have been there long enough where like they've had kids and stuff. And they had land. And so now they also reaffirmed with a Supreme Court decision that like your kids can't inherit your land if they're not Tanzanian, which they used to be able to do. Hey, Eddie boy. So the Tanzanian crew's just getting beat up left and right. So it's really important to pick the right country for what you're doing. And so there's that. Kenya's great. Kenya's great to me. Kenya's great to my businesses. Um, but it ain't the right country for everybody. So make sure that you're dealing with facts. Make sure that you're checking your industry. Make sure that you're making sure that where you're going has the right level of infrastructure to support what you're doing. One of our companies had a plan to build a hospital, right? So this country has the infrastructure for it. South Africa also had the infrastructure for it, but then you gotta, you have to look at the entire environment, and the people are part of the environment, right? So you got to look at like what the people in general are like, and if that jives with what you're trying to do, right? And what are they doing right now in South Africa? They don't want foreigners using their health care, blah, 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 right? So these are the kinds of things you got to pay attention to, depending on what kind of, business you're looking to get into. The hospital that our sister company is looking to start is superior technologically to most hospitals in the United States, right? So sometimes the attitude of a people block what's available for them, because technically the highest level of medical or healthcare system, the highest healthcare system on the continent is technically in South Africa. The second highest is Kenya, right? But that attitude, that we saw when we were looking at it and kind of trying to consider whether we should place a hospital of that, caliber in South Africa, the attitude of the people not wanting foreigners to engage in their healthcare system definitely put a damper on us, obviously coming as foreign investors and creating a state-of-the-art hospital in that country. So then we had to shift to Kenya, right? And so it's always going to be facts over feelings in any kind of capital play. You can't be making capital decisions based on how much you like the place or how much you think it's beautiful or how much you like the vibe. It definitely has to be based off of the facts around the situation and around the GDP of the country and around the energy of the people, and how they feel about foreign investment, and it's their country, you know what I mean? So you always want to be respectful of that for sure. So just makes all the sense in the world for us to do our thing in Kenya instead. So that's what we did. Now we had onboarded some clients. What was the makeup of their board? It was pretty eclectic. It was two Nigerians, one Grenadian, and one Kenyan. All of them born in their respective countries, but had immigrated to the United States. So they weren't like second generation in the United States. They all like spoke their languages and like came from their respective countries. Even the Grenadian, actually. So Grenadians speak English, but they have like a country language called Gypsy. But anyway, so they were all, except for the Grenadian. The Grenadian had a doctorate in food science. The other three were all in either pharmacology or pharmaceuticals, and they already worked for some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, right? So one worked for Merck, and the other one worked for a company I had never heard of. And then like these are the things you learn when you're doing like strategic planning for clients. So I'd never heard of the company initially, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. But then in doing the research for the client work, it turns out that they were like number two or number three in pharmaceuticals in the world, and it's just a name you've never heard of. It'll come to me, but she worked for them, and then the two Nigerians were on the team that figured out, was it nano pharmaceuticals? There's a process by which there are pharmaceutical components that would typically be toxic to the body. But with this nanotechnology, you can add the component to the like inside another component, right? And then the body will absorb, the non-toxic components, and then absorb that medicine in a non-toxic way. So it's like the highest level of pharmaceutical tech. And this Nigerian guy was part of like the team that figured it out. So, all right, cool. Got this dream team of people put together. The Nigerians could not get a deal in Nigeria. It was crazy. Right? So we ended up placing that company in Freetown in Sierra Leone, which is nuts. But so those are some of the things, that you gotta look into is, what's the ease of doing business in that country. And there are ease of doing business scores, right? They stopped doing it for a while, but you can go back and get a feel for which countries got the best scores based on the last ease of doing business, score release. But a lot of the famous kind of African countries aren't even in the top 10. Like they're nowhere near business ready countries. Right. So but Kenya was number one for quite a while. Then Rwanda had announced that they were doing like the Silicon Valley thing, and which they never did. And so they became number one, but then dropped to like number five when they didn't do it. And then Seychelles and Mauritius. Well, Seychelles came off of the gray list. I feel like they're number one now. Mauritius might be number two. Kenya, I think, is number three. Rwanda's number four. I'm trying to think who's right up there with them. But like the top five aren't, none of them are in the West or the South. I think South is in the top 10 though, which is better than the rest of the rest of the continent. But most of them are in the East. Seychelles is in the East. Mauritius is in the East. Obviously, Kenya's in the East. Rwanda's in the East. So most of the countries that are like really open for business are in the East. So you know, Rwanda's had their skirmish situation. So that's I'm sure that's knocked them down a peg or two. Tanzania's never been on the list. So it really just matters, what it is you're trying to do and making sure that you do your due diligence and you find the right spot. It's really all it boils down to. I feel like from a money making perspective, Kenya made the most sense to me personally, like without my business. Kenya made the most sense to me personally as well because the financial system is similar. It's similar enough that you can intuit how it works, which is important. If you're making moves in finance, it's not important, I guess, if you're like living off of like a pension per se, and you're not going to invest in anything, and all your money's coming from somewhere else, and you're like, okay, then it doesn't really matter, right? But I knew I was going to have to invest, so making sure that you have a similar financial system, where you can understand the investments, they make sense to you, the rules are similar, so there's no real learning curve. That matters because learning curve costs money. So anytime there's a learning curve, it's going to cost you money. And the longer it takes, the more money it's going to cost you. So the only country that we were able to just jump into, and it wasn't like me or like my special set of skills or anything like that. Everybody who we brought in that original team was able to do the same thing. So the country as a whole had zero learning curve, right? And there's levels to it, right? Like if you're operating at a low level, there's still a learning curve, right? But if you're operating at a medium or high level, then there's really no learning curve at all. So it really is about like who you associate with. And so there were folks in the original days that like associated with like low income folks and shopped in low income places. So the mentality shift, we weren't actually even aware that one was necessary, quite frankly, right? Because everybody was new, so we didn't realize there's a mentality shift that has to take place immediately. And so the original mentality of some of the folks was like, go to Aldi's, like steak is steak. You buy the cheese from, the cheapest place, like that, right? Like survival mode, which is, nothing wrong with it, except you're not in survival mode when you get here, right? You're in abundance mode, essentially. The issue with that is anybody who's come from the hood, myself included, knows that folks that are in that mindset, hey, what's going on? Folks that are in that mindset will do anything to survive. Like if you're in survival mode, you'll do whatever it takes to survive, right? And so those are the folks that are like, ah, I'm getting ripped off, I'm getting scammed, I'm getting this, I'm getting that. My daddy used to say, you lay down with dogs, you get it with fleas, right? And so, but then half of us, and this was actually really, really good for us. Half of us weren't experiencing that at all. So we were like, what the hell? What are they doing that's causing them to be in this situation where they're saying everybody's scamming them and everybody's taking advantage of them, and we're not seeing that at all, right? And so what it ended up being, what we ended up figuring out, it took us like a year or two actually to figure it out. But what it ended up being was the class of people that different folks were hanging out with, right? So the folks that were in like hardcore survival mode were taking them for everything they got, trying to survive, whatever. And then they were having that experience, and a lot of them ended up having to go back home broke because they never broke, the cycle or the circle. Because I guess it was familiar to them. You know what I mean? It felt like the hood. It felt like struggling and making things happen and hustling and whatever. So it felt familiar, but they couldn't win the game over here because it's not they're not familiar with it. It's not their place. So for the rest of us though that were kind of operating in I guess the middle class and above, we weren't running into that, and we didn't realize that that's what it was until we really kind of took stock of it and analyzed what was going on. So who you associate with matters, and flipping the switch, even if maybe you did come from, I mean, I was doing fairly well in Philadelphia and I was still paycheck to paycheck. I know millionaires who live paycheck to paycheck. You know what I mean? So in America, you can be bringing in a whole lot of money and still not be doing too great. You can still be one paycheck away from being completely broke. And so no matter how much money you're making, you still might have the mindset of I need to find the cheapest place, I need to pay the lowest prices, I need to blah 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 blah. But then in those places, the folks that you're going to associate in those places might be a bit dangerous to your lifestyle, and especially in a place where you don't know many people and you don't know how it works. You don't necessarily know like what the prices should be. So that was the number one cause of half of those kind of original people reporting that they're being overcharged, they're being scammed, they're being this, they're being that, blah 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 blah. At this point, for a lot of us, accent or no accent, the price is the price. You know what I mean? There is no we're being overcharged for being foreigners or anything like that, because we're not going to the cheapest places. Like at this point, we're looking for the best quality. You know what I mean? And things are sold differently at different classes. You know what I mean? So, like here where I live, there's a lot of places you walk in and everything has a price tag on it. You go to the Maasai market, ain't nothing got no damn price tag on it. You're gonna haggle over the price, which is not something that most Westerners are used to. And so one person might get it for 1,000 and you might pay 10,000 because you're not that good at haggling, and then feel some kind of way because you suck at negotiation, right? But at different levels, people ain't got time for that. You know what I mean? Even the local people here ain't got time to be haggling in no daggone market at a certain class level. So once you start getting into places where you're dealing for quality, those prices are typically presented, and then you don't have to deal with the nonsense. So there's a mindset set shift of, if you're a price buyer, you might want to shift to being a value buyer when you make a move. And it's not just here. I saw the same thing in China when I lived there. I saw the same thing in the Philippines when I lived there. So it ain't an African thing. It's a mindset thing. In Western countries, there typically isn't haggling. The entire rest of the world, which is the majority of the world, they typically have market economies, which market economies include haggling. Even China has a market economy. So you could go to the Rensolu and you're going to haggle, and every town has a Rensolu. and you're going to haggle in China because it's a market economy. Or you can go, to the middle class and everything has a price tag on it and the quality is better, right? So it's just a matter of where you're operating. That's what dictates what your experience is going to be. And typically, your mindset is what dictates, where you're going to be comfortable operating at. Hey, Timmy. Which Timmy is that? Is that the Timmy we just relocated? Let me know. Thanks for the likes, Laura. I thought there was a question, but I don't see it now. I was looking on the live streams, and I'm not sure I can go back. I'm live on Fanbase. I'm not sure I can go back in the chat on Fanbase. So maybe I just missed it. Hey, if you sent me a question and I didn't answer it, I was just looking for it and I can't find it. So just send it again. But yeah, anyway. So Kenya was it, for me for all of those reasons. Now, financial markets being familiar was a huge help, right? Because the familiarity of the financial market, but the non-saturated status of the financial markets is like a super bonus, right? You're not competing against anywhere near as many people. The rates are way better. So the deals can be way better on the investor side, right? Definitely like loan deals are way better on the US side, but that's everywhere. US has like the best loan interest rates essentially in the world, right? It's always kind of been that way. I was surprised when I first left the United States in a business capacity, and went somewhere that was like known for banking, right? Like we went to Switzerland and we were doing a Swiss deal, and which is obviously known for banking, and their interest rates were like double ours. And I was like, oh, okay. So typically US interest rates are the best of the world. So most of our folks that are doing any kind of loan work, taking any kind of loans, they're typically taking those loans from the United States, as long as those loans don't have caveats on them about usage, that include usage outside of the United States. So like VA loans have those caveats, right? So like you can't take like a VA like mortgage, and then use it for a house abroad, right? Now you can take a VA loan, a VA mortgage, and get a local house, and get a local quadplex, and live in one and rent out the other three for a year, and then refinance to a conventional, right? And then if you got any, if you forced any appreciation, right? So like if you rehab the property and increase the value of the property in that first year, and then you cash out refinance and you get some actual cash in your hands, you can take that cash and go do whatever you want with it, right? So sometimes it's a matter of planning, but depending on like what tools are available to you. So if the financial tools that are available to you can't be used outside of the country, then sometimes it's just a matter of planning, and getting something that does qualify, and then cash out refinancing so that you have that cash in your hand to go do something else with, and then moving like that. So a lot of times it's just strategy, which we talk about all the time. Like the people with the most strategy always win, right? So a lot of times that's just all it is. But a lot of times, like your personal loans and stuff like that, you don't typically have to tell a financial institution what that loan is for. Don't over talk. Just answer the questions that are, on the application forms. You don't have to give out additional information that they didn't ask for. And yeah, typically your personal loans you can use for anything. If it's a business, then we do a lot of clients where, depending on their setup or their business setup, their business in the U.S. might own a certain percentage of their business here. So if it's a subsidiary of the U.S. business, if it's a foreign branch of the U.S. business, and you have a business line of credit, or you have a business loan, or you have working capital or something like that, you can deploy that working capital anywhere in your network typically, right? So you can deploy that working capital in your Kenyan branch and pay U.S. interest rates on it, right? So that helps a lot. Sometimes the interest rates are so high, it's worth taking a loan to invest. We've had plenty of people do that, right? Typically, well, I shouldn't say typically because it wasn't a typical situation, but when we had the what was it? The February 2024 Kenyan tax exempt infrastructure bond. That was a guaranteed 18.46% ROI annually, right? So even if your credit sucked, you know what I mean, your interest rate was like 14%, right? So if you're making 18% annually and your interest rate is 14%, which is a bad loan, right? It's a bad interest rate. But even at that bad interest rate, you're making money off of the loan, right? So back when that one hit and there was that guarantee, a lot of folks just were like, I'll take a loan. I remember there was a Navy Fed. I don't know what the rate is now, but there was a Navy Fed personal loan available for those guys who had those accounts. It was like 7.86% or some nonsense like that. So you take a personal loan at 7.86% and buy a government bond that's guaranteed 18%. Right? Right? So, and it's a tax bond on this side. So it's like obviously a no-brainer, right? So a lot of folks, when they see those solid interest rates, and they have access to U.S. interest rates, they can just go ahead and take those loans and invest in a safe investment like a treasury bond, and get that giant almost 20% a year, for that one was I think 10 years, but so what, right? So they're able to pay back, the loan and the interest on the loan, and put some money in their pocket off of the bond. So, it just depends. Just depends what it is you're trying to do. But having a familiar financial system helps. Do you get a notification of Windows? Interest rates are coming up. Hmm. Oh, one sorry talking text. Gotcha. Okay. I'll wait. I'll wait. I'm here. Go ahead and re-ask it. Get a notification of. Oh, when those. Is that what it is? When those? Do you get a notification of when those interest rates are going up? Is that what you were trying to say? Um, no. There's like I don't get like insider trading like information type of thing, right? So what they do is they announce them every month. They announce them, so they announce them, and then they typically announce them before the auction happens. So bonds happen in auctions, right? Now you're not sitting there like bidding like it's Sotheby's or anything like that. It's just called, the way they sell them is just called an auction, right? And so there's an announcement that for the December bond auction, we're going to have these two bonds available, right? And typically there's a like midterm and a long term. So it's typically like, all right, we got this one that's 10 years and this one that's 20. And the interest rate, or the coupon rate, as they would call it, when the 10-year one is, I don't know, 14%, and the coupon on the long one is 12%, right? And we're looking for a trillion shillings, you know what I mean? So they'll list like how much money they're trying to raise, because a bond is the government borrowing money from the people and then paying them back interest, right? So instead of them going to a bank, they're going to the people and raising money. So they're going to say, we're trying to raise this much money, and that's that, right? Now you can the government can reopen a bond. So sometimes you'll get a reopening, right? So if they reopen that 18.46, it'll sell out so fast you wouldn't even necessarily be guaranteed a spot, right? Because if they go over, they can say, okay, we're not accepting these random bids, and they'll randomize it to make it as fair as possible. They'll be like, all right, these random bids, we went too far. We only wanted 1 billion and you guys bought 10 billion. Like, we're going to take 2 billion and the other 8, we're going to reject those bids, right? Then you just don't pay. You'll just get a notification that you don't owe anything, and whatever. But I mean, that's a big one, right? So if they reopen that, expect that to sell out almost immediately, because tax exempt, it's almost 20%. So every 4 years your money would essentially double, right? So it was a great bond if you're around to take advantage of it. But that's how it works. There's a notification from the central bank. It's a prospectus, so you can see all the numbers on the notification. Let me see if I can show you one. Let me see if I have one in here that I can show you. The rest of you guys, unfortunately, TikTok is the only platform that I know of that has this feature. So the rest of you guys will have to go Google it and see what it looks like. Didn't expect to be showing this, so I don't have it prepped. Give me a moment to find one. You tech folks out there, I need a better way to index photos. I need to be able to find photos faster. Is that? That looks like it might be one. Is it? Let's see. Yes, I think this is one. So it looks like that. The bar on the left is probably the shorter bond. The bar on the right is probably the longer bond. It'll say, like, what does it say there? Fixed coupon treasury bonds. That was September of 2024, it looks like. So it's like a full prospectus. So it'll have a breakdown that looks like that. And it'll be a full prospectus, and it'll give you all the numbers and all of that. Comes directly from the Central Bank of Kenya, and then you just choose whether you want one or not. And then you do have to have. There are two central bank accounts. There's a central bank account that you can use to buy bonds. Let me turn this thing off before every time my hand comes up, a picture pops up. So there's a central bank account that you buy bonds with, and they sound similar. Like one's like a CDS account, and the other one's like a CSD account. But one you buy bonds with, and the other one you buy stocks with. So if you want to like Nairobi has its own stock exchange. So if you want to be buying and selling stocks, you would have one of the types of accounts, and then the other account is for buying bonds. Um, there's an app called CSD How, I believe it is, and that's the app where you get the bond account. If you don't have a permit, you don't have a KRA pin and all of that, then you have to go through a broker. All right. So we do have some clients that don't have their stuff yet, like they don't have their permit yet, and but they want to invest in the bonds because of the interest rate. So we they end up going through one of our banking relationships, and then the broker and the bank handles that for them. How did the payment work? You just get a payment. So like, man, I wish I could show you my my text messages, but you'll get a text message that says what does it say? It says there's been a, what does it say? Something like there's been a change to your account or something like that, or there's a modification processing or something like that. So you'll get that text message, and then like 2 days later, you'll get a deposit, and that's it. Now, if it's a bond that there's tax on, at the end of the year, you'll get a tax withholding certificate, which you don't have to do anything. They already took the taxes, right? And that's a final tax. So you technically don't have to do anything. Now, we have like an accountant that like handles like our tax and all that. So they still add it in to, the tax filings and all of that, but you technically don't have to because it is a final tax, right? But they itemize everything and blah 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 blah. But for like a layman that doesn't have a whole lot going on other than the investments, you just get to just keep your tax certificates, and that's the end of that. So it's pretty simple. They make it easy, which is smart. You know what I mean? Like if you want to borrow money from the people and you want that to be part of your fundraising, it's pretty smart to make it as easy as possible for the people to give you their money and for you to give the people back their payments so that they're happy about giving you their money. So that they've gotten right as a government. Just deposit it in your bank account. Yes. And typically, like if it's one of those clients that like don't have their permits and all of that stuff, typically what'll end up happening is the broker essentially opens a brokerage account for you. So it'll get dumped into that account. We have folks who ladder with no permit. So laddering means that the way the bonds work is they pay out twice a year. So they guarantee you, whatever percent they guarantee you, and then they pay you every 6 months, right? And then at the end of the term of the bond, you get all the money back. So there's plenty of folks they'll get 6 bonds. And remember, they pay out twice a year, so that's 12 payments. There's 12 months in a year, right? So they'll get 6 bonds, and then every month they get a payment from the government, right? So they get a check from the government every month. And there's folks that actually then repatriate that money, which has its own tax implications, possibly. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's tax free. It just depends on how you set it up. But they'll repatriate that money and actually live off of Kenyan money in America, right? So it's not always, oh, the dollar is bigger, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to come with, and live great here because my dollar is worth more. There's a lot of folks they're paying all their U.S. bills off of their Kenyan bonds. That depends on how many transfers you make, right? So there's something called KYC. The deeper you are in KYC, the better your relationship is, like with your financial institutions and all of that, the faster things happen. So if I wired money from the United States to Kenya today, I'd have it tomorrow. If you wired money and it's your first time, you might have it next week. So the more you do it, the faster it gets. Yes, it's the same with the business account. Yep. Yep. And the same thing with my business account. I'd have it tomorrow. Now, if I randomly sent money to a different account, right? There's a couple accounts that we routinely send money to for business services, here in Kenya. So like legal gets a wire from our U.S. business, probably monthly, right? And then there are other accounts, vendors and whatnot that get wires regularly. If I randomly sent it to a different account, then I might have to go through some sort of verification anyway, right? So typically, what happens with that is like if we're sending something to a random account, number one, it's a business bank account, so it should be a business reason, and then the contract, right? Like the service agreement or the contract agreement that we have signed with the client is typically all that's necessary to get it through. No, those aren't mine. Yeah, my dogs aren't here where I'm at right now. Right now, we're at the condo. My dogs are all at the farmhouse, which you'll start seeing. We won't be at the condo much longer. Like next month, we're just going to permanently move to the farmhouse. So you'll start seeing that. But yeah, those are not my dogs. But they're not even on my property. They're some neighbors' dogs. I'm surprised you can hear that. I wonder which. Well, all right. I guess it's that stream then, huh? Okay. Oh, that is the newest phone, isn't it? Okay. S25 Ultra for the win. TikTok, you guys are on my oldest phone, so there's that. How's the stock market? Like any other stock market, some stocks are up, some stocks are. Oh, you did hear them? Okay. Some stocks are up, some stocks are down. You know, just like any other stock market, you got to do the same level of like research. It's just that there's less stocks, so in that way, it's easier. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah. No, TikTok. You guys are on. What is that? It's a. I think it's an S23 Ultra. Since it's funny, since I left the U.S., I have all the phones, right? So in the U.S., I would trade one in to get the next one. Here, those programs don't really exist, so I just buy I just buy the next phone. So yeah, in front of me right now, it's hilarious. But in front of me right now, it's the S23, the S24, and the S25. They're all. Before I wouldn't have had them, and be like, no, 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 I traded in that one to get the next one. But we don't really deal in credit out here. It's actually nice. I like it a lot. I don't owe anything to anyone. That's actually pretty cool. Actually, like everything that interacts with me owes me. The government owes me because I own bonds. There are companies that owe me because I own stock. I own land. So everything owes me instead of me owing it, which is refreshing compared to what life was like in the US, where I owed everybody. I owed my cell phone company because I'm doing the trade in with the cell phones. I owe my electric company, owe my gas company, you know, owe the water bill, because that everything is paid on the back end there. So almost everything is credit, whether we realize it or not, right? You get your electric turned on, you use electric for a month before you pay it. So when you turn off electric, there's still a month to be paid, right? So you're operating on credit, right? So all of that stuff is essentially credit. You always owe someone. So you have the sword of Damocles over your head, at all times because you owe people, and if you don't pay the people you owe, they're going to turn something off or repost something, which is not the way people live here. How is health and dental? Does residency qualify for local insurance? You don't even need residency for local insurance, really. The only difference is that your policy might be different. You know, Sword of Damocles. Oh, Sword of Damocles is like a fable, right? So when the Sword of Damocles is over your head, it means that at any given time the sword might drop, and if the sword drops, then it's over for you. So, but there, Google that. Google. You might enjoy the story. It's a nice parable. Yeah. So travel insurance, obviously, anybody can have travel insurance, and you can get travel insurance that's medical and dental, not like your bags are lost in the plane, right? And then there are insurance companies here that exist in the U.S. So you can just call them, like Aetna's one of them. So if you have Aetna, you can literally just call them and be like, "Oh, I'm going to Kenya. Can you add Kenya to my Aetna policy?" And you can add Kenya and remove America, which will dramatically decrease your premium. So you could there are definitely ways that you could actually have Kenyan insurance and not have a permit. But I like it, you know. As far as how is it, yeah, I think it's great. I haven't had to pay for anything. I had one, at least cost wise, major surgery this year. It wasn't like a health, major surgery, but it cost a lot. I didn't have to pay anything, so that was completely covered. All outpatient care was completely covered. I just had my last up yesterday, completely covered. I have another procedure that I'll probably have sometime next year. That'll be completely covered. So, you know, now I didn't buy the cheapest insurance, right? So it also goes back to the mindset thing, right? If the people who are constantly looking for the cheapest of everything, you're not going to have a good time because you're going to get what you pay for, right? There's no law protecting you like what you might not realize is actually happening in the United States, where like you're getting the cheapest, yes, but there's a law somewhere that says, okay, the minimum level of whatever has to be this, right? In auto insurance, there is a law. And in health insurance, it's interesting because the standards are locked in. So to a certain extent, there is a law there. But what changes is the coverages, right? The coverage limits, right? So it might be like, okay, you have to have 5 tiers of insurance, and your top tier should have, I don't know, 100 million of inpatient major medical is what we would probably call that, and then maybe 10 million of outpatient. But the way that's cut up is essentially up to the insurance company. So one company might say, okay, cool, you buy the highest policy, you got your 100 million, but only 1 million at a time. Anything over 1 million, you got to pay the difference, right? Another company might come in and say, yeah, you get 10 million at a time, and that's how they can kind of adjust their charges and all of that stuff. So you know, if it's important to you, then get the quality. But a quality mindset is the mindset that's going to do the best for you. Really abroad, it's not even really just here. Abroad, same thing happened with me in China. Like in China, when I lived there, as long as I was getting like the quality stuff, I was fine. If I was price hunting, it crushed me every time because I get exactly what I paid for. Cheap is typically expensive around the world, so keep that in mind. Hey vibes, how's it going? And I'm not sure. I'd have to check. I'd have to check and see if there's a rider. I'm not sure there is. I don't think I got separate vision and dental. I think my insurance just covers everything. And I have like a family plan. So like I took one of my nephews to a vision center because he was having issues in school. And the teachers were like, we don't know if he can see. Like the way that the type of issues he's having, it's odd. And so we took him to a vision center, and he was like covered under my plan as a family member. And yeah, we didn't need any like special vision card or anything like that. So either it's in there and I just, forgot that it's part of some kind of rider that we purchased, or if you have a high enough plan, just everything's covered. It's just all inclusive. What's up, vibes? You enjoying yourself? Claire. Data. Data. What's the data thing? Or did you mean like a different word and you're like speaking the text and it wrote something weird? Kenya selling U.S. health data to the U.S. I think a lot of those things are sensationalized. Um, so it's not really that clear cut, right? So SHA is like Medicaid, right? So what it is that Kenya's or the U.S. is supposed to make an investment in like the SHA infrastructure, right? Like I don't have SHA, right? Because I'm not Kenyan yet, right? So I don't have SHA, I don't have access to SHA, and I don't utilize SHA, right? So I think they sensationalize a lot of that stuff. We're like, oh yeah, they're just going to sell everybody's health data. No, they're not. But anyone who utilizes that system that they're investing in, essentially they own the system. Like they're buying the system and supposedly upgrading it and all of that, and then yes, that data would be going through U.S. servers and all of that because they own the system, right? But if you're not using the system, like, not it's not just because you're in Kenya and you're getting healthcare done, it would fly up that system. So I don't know. I don't know if it's investable because it's the government, right? So the only way to invest in that would be to buy a bond, but it wouldn't be a direct investing in that because it's a government system. Same thing in the United States. It's still a government system, so it's not like, it'd be one thing if they were like bringing in an Oracle, then obviously you just buy Oracle stock, right? But a direct investment, probably not. Now, if you do your due diligence maybe and figure out if there's going to be like a special like thumbprint scanner that's necessary, or if the US is going to have like my chart handle the data transfer or something like that. So like, if you do your due diligence and find out there's some third party player, or there's some technology that's necessary where you can go figure out who makes that technology and invest in them. And that's just like typical due diligence, you know what I mean? But as far as I know at the moment, nothing has been privatized. So it's just the government. Yeah. 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 I haven't seen anything about, that as far as any kind of private company. If it pops up though, I'll definitely mention it. But I haven't seen any private company that's involved in the implementation of the infrastructure upgrades to Shaw. And I'm not necessarily sure that I would invest, because so before Shaw, there was something called NHIF, which is actually working as far as I could tell. And then before NHIF, there was something called Mama Linda. And Mama Linda was like their attempt at like socialized healthcare, where it was like free. I don't even know what happened to Mama Linda, right? So it just kind of disappeared, and then they were doing NHIF, and as far as I could tell, NHIF was doing well, and then they switched to SHIF, really for no reason that I can intuit, right? So based on that pattern, there's no reason for me to believe that halfway through Shah, after it's been funded, after it's been paid for, they won't come up with LHIF, and switch to another, healthcare network. So I probably wouldn't even, bother with something that's that volatile. If I've seen it change in the last 7 years 3 times, I probably wouldn't even make an investment there. But that's my like risk tolerance. You know what I mean? There are some people that they got a risk tolerance where they're okay rolling the dice on that. Oh yeah, yeah. I wish I was able to talk to the kid who invented it, sold it for 1 million shillings when he could have sold it for 10,000 shillings and 1 shilling per transaction. 1 shilling per transaction royalty. They would have agreed to it. It's not much. 1 shilling per transaction royalty, and right now I think there's something like 900 million transactions a day. He'd have made 900 million shillings a day. That's still like $9 million, right? A day, right? But yeah, you don't know what you don't know. That's the problem. Same thing happened with YouTube. The guy who sold YouTube, he didn't have any royalties, nothing like that. And I think he technically sold it for 10 million. It was a guy who lived in Fleetwood, Pennsylvania. Can't remember his name. Well, there was two of them, but one of the guys lived in Fleetwood, Pennsylvania. But I think it was technically 10 million. But by the time the lawyers' fees and all of that thing, I think he got like two. It was crazy. Definitely could have done a better deal, but don't know what you don't know. Yeah, it was sad, sad. Even if he wasn't doing a full shilling per transaction, even if he said half a shilling, 50, 50 cents per transaction, still 450 million shillings. Still like, still talking about like, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million a day, right? So it's just a matter of, having some foresight. What's the kid who sang the Lion King, and they tried to pay him, what was it, $10 million, and his mom said nope, we'll take $100,000 in royalties for life, and he's a multimillionaire. Which is what this kid should have done. He should have said, I'll sell it to you, not a million shillings, give me 10,000 shillings and 1 shilling per transaction for life. Because I guarantee you he's broke right now. I guarantee you that million shillings did not last him. Yeah, I mean, and sometimes it's just you don't know. Like some people don't even know what the word royalty means. Like they think it's, you know, Meghan Merkel and you know what I mean? And Queen Elizabeth, so you say royalty, they have no idea that it's a way to get paid passively, you know what I mean? So some people just don't know. They're just like, "Oh, you're giving me 1 million? Let me take that million and pay my taxes." Like they don't realize it might be better to take 100,000 and $1 per transaction for life than to take this million up front. So it's sad. It's sad. We don't. It's not taught in any country that even in China. China has a really really solid, vibrant educational system, and they don't teach business. It's just not taught in any educational system, public, that I've ever seen. Most private education systems do teach it, but you know, bonfires, fireworks, feasts, that type of stuff. That's what's going on the coast for New Year's. Maybe I'll bring some fireworks in. I haven't had a beach fireworks show in a long time. Now that you say that, yeah, Vision. I mean, yeah, I can't argue with that. It's absolutely that's absolutely what it is for quite a few people. I remember I was um, taking a tour. I was young, man. I can't even remember how old I was. Maybe 12 or something. But they were looking at putting me in a school called Valley Forge Military Academy, which is where General Schwarzkopf went to school. Um, and entrepreneurship was one of like the high school subjects. You know what I mean? That it's right outside of, well, it's in Valley Forge. It's right outside of Philadelphia. Really kind of prestigious military boarding school type of situation. I ended up not going, but I remember when we took the tour and all of that stuff. Uh, they were showing us like the class, syllabuses and all that stuff. And I remember that entrepreneurship was one of the classes. Um, they had like sports that regular schools didn't have. Like they had like all Olympic sports, so they had like taekwondo and like fencing and competed against, I don't know who they competed against, but like they had, competitions against other schools. Like public schools would have like basketball competitions. So definitely a whole different, world on the private side. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a cool place. I can't even remember why I was so young. I might not have even known the real reason why, but I can't remember why I ended up not going. I took some tests and then like they called and they were like, bring your kid out here. We'll give him a scholarship and da 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 da. And I can't remember why I ended up not going. But I would have had to live there. Definitely would have changed the trajectory. I probably wouldn't be here now. Probably would have been in the military because it is a military academy. But yeah, and I think at the time, like one of the crown princes of Saudi Arabia or something was there. Because you go there and they brag about whoever is there. So I know Schwarzkopf at the time was a big deal. That's one of their alumni. And then it was like the Crown Prince of something was there. There was a couple other people I can't think of right now. But it's just one. Typically, all of that stuff is just networking, honestly. And when we do a lot of like our generational wealth stuff, there's a lot of families, that want to explore that as well and figure out how to put their kids in position. Um, so yeah, we actually had a guy who ended up sending his kids to an academy I'd never heard of in Switzerland. It's called La Rose, and it was pretty interesting because the passport portfolio really helped him out because they only take so many kids from every country, which was wild. So it was like there's only two Americans, two Canadians, two, like, really really interesting, and it was hella expensive. And but because he was a passport portfolio client, he had like five or six nationalities, so he was able to apply five or six times. And one of his kids got, the other one didn't. One of his kids got in, and he said it was definitely tough. But they live in like the Swiss Alps. Like they take a helicopter to school. They live there. It's a really, you got to look it up. La Rose Institute. It's a pretty interesting school. But I mean, the kids network wise, he's set. Like he's networked into the richest families in the world just by going to that school, which is typically what it's about. It's not typically about like the classes are better or the teachers are better or the whatever are better. It's typically about networking. I knew. Oh wait, I went to a private school run by a well-known Italian sisterhood. Ah, cool. Called Loretto. Okay, I have heard of Loretto. Yep, yep, yep. I knew the German national anthem before knowing the American national anthem. So my mom pulled me. I bet. Yeah, there are a couple. It's interesting because obviously America is like the new kid block, a couple hundred years old. Um, but I'm trying to remember the names of them. There are three kind of elite class schools, and none of them are the ones you're thinking of. But there are like three elite U.S. schools. There's actually one near La Rose, so it's in Switzerland, but it's the American. It's actually called the American something. So but it's in Switzerland. But there are three in America, and I can't remember the name of them. Then there are three in Switzerland. There's La Rose, there's the American one, and there's another one in Switzerland. There's, I think there's three in Germany as well. Seems like three is kind of the number. Um, there's some in France. There's some in the UK. Trying to think of all the places. When we were researching for him, we kind of found them all, and I had never heard of any of them. Like it's not Harvard, like that's not it. I had never heard of any of these schools. um I'm trying to remember where else, but there were these kind of like pinpoint places. So there's US, Germany, UK, Switzerland, Netherlands. What else? I was surprised that there wasn't really anything in Italy. There's one in Monaco. So there are these places. No, no. Kenya has private schools. Like this is a different level. This is like you go to the school and like there are princes attending. Like Kenya has some great private schools and some great international schools, but not what we're talking about. Like on the La Rose Institute level, it's completely different. Um, but they could, it's something that we were looking at creating one, and it takes time to get on that La Rose. Like, you can't just open a school and be like, oh, we're on La Rose level. You need to prove it. But we were thinking of creating a school that could approach that level eventually in Kenya, simply because there's all the international schools have a curriculum here, right? So you go to an international school in Kenya, and then you essentially choose a curriculum. So you can have American curriculum, you can have the British curriculum, you can have French curriculum, you can even have Chinese curriculum. What else have I seen? Canadian. There's Canadian curriculum. Um, I've seen schools that come from Emirates, but I don't think they have an Emirates curriculum, right? So that's how that works, right? With the international schools in Kenya. What kind of irritated us was there's no African curriculum. Even like the Kenyan curriculum comes from the colonial days of the UK, so it's essentially a UK curriculum. And so we've been working for about a year now to find the best, like objectively best, right? So like research based best, curriculum standards, and then build out like an actual African curriculum that can be deployed, on the continent. So we're looking at something that blends IB, which is really the creme de la creme standard. The secondary standard is probably Montessori. And so the blending of Montessori and IB standards, for this particular project is something that we're looking at. But it takes forever. It's a very serious level to get to. And it takes just solid dedication. And most of those schools are boarding schools. So it seems like in best practice that level of dedication doesn't come out if you're going home every day. Like you have to be locked in to the educational process to reach that level. But again, the education tends to be a byproduct of the networking. It tends to be, if you go to this school, you're going to get networked into the best families. You're going to have the best business opportunities. You're going to know the best people, to cultivate your future. Blah 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 blah. But yeah, we can definitely get there with a little bit of vision and a bit of capital. We can definitely get there. What's IB? IB is International Baccalaureate. So International Baccalaureate is one of the standards that has kind of the best results in the real world, and it has not a community driven element. It has a philanthropy element. So one of the things that you have to do, almost like as a senior project, is you have to benefit, the community in doing this like senior project. It's like the focus almost of high school. You have all your classes, of course, and your arithmetic and your mathematics and language and all of that. But the focus is like the first impact that you make in the world, essentially, which is wild at a high school level. But you essentially are working on like a master's level thesis the entire way through high school, which is really super cool actually. And so it I we like it as a system. It has some of the best scientific results and so on and so forth. Montessori's okay too, and it has some pretty good results, but baccalaureate seems more real world practical. My kindergarten buddy wore a three-piece suit to school every day. Was taking his school via limousine. Yeah, I mean, like I said, they were taken via helicopter. It was crazy. And the campus was huge. Like the campus rivaled some college campuses that I've seen. So definitely a very very serious institute of education. But it was like, you know, once you start seeing it, it's like, oh, of course, you know what I mean. If you got the money for it. And La Rose was the most expensive one. So he was looking at a couple in the last moments, and La Rose was the most expensive one. Not that that's always the best, but it was crazy. The price tag was nuts. but he's very happy with it, you know. And it's only up to high school. They don't have a La Rose college, but it's like something like 95% of their graduates go to Ivy. So there's that. If you got your eyes set on a specific Ivy League. The U.S. one. Hold on. On this phone, I have files. Let me see if I can find it. That's one of the cool things I do like about doing like strategic planning for businesses is you end up learning a lot about other people's businesses. Mm, let's see, where are we? I do not have the list, so I'll have to go into the actual report we made for him. There were three. Okay. United States. Aha. All right. Woodside Priory School, the Athenian School, and is that it? The Village School. Yeah, they're all boarding schools. Woodside Priory was $90,000 a year. Athenian might as well have been like 87,000 a year. And we don't have a price on the report for the Village School. That's interesting. Why don't we? Yeah, that's interesting. Oh no, the Village School was 85,000 a year. So Village School, it was a Texas IB school. Again, IB is like really the gold standard. Um, let's see. Athenian is in Cali, and the Woodside Priory is also in Cali. Woodside Priory obviously is Priory. It was is a Catholic. Um, but yeah, those were the three U.S. ones. So yeah, like typically stuff that like stand regular people have just never even heard of. Right. But yeah, that ends up being where a lot of the generational wealth and passport portfolio people like end up in a generation or two. It's not right away. Hey, each one, how are you? Do I bird watch? No, not particularly. Not anymore. I used to. Maybe I will again. Now that I have the freedom to, maybe I will again. I used to bird watch and bird call. It's funny that you would ask that. Yeah, something I did a long time ago with my dad. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. A lot of them are called institutes, and even though they're called institutes, they are high schools. But yeah, you're correct. I think Americans do that though. I think Americans connect institute with college, which is not necessarily what the rest of the world does. Same thing with like state. Americans connect state with like less than a country because of the way America is set up, when state actually means country to the rest of the world. I think it's just the quality of the phones. Actually, like somebody was commenting on the dogs barking a little while ago, and so yeah, to me they're not even like I can barely even hear them. Yeah, no, I definitely have had some moments where I'm kind of just sitting on the porch having a coffee, and I realize like some of the bird sounds like I haven't heard before. And we used to, it's so crazy you asked that question. We used to go to the Caribbean and like bird watch there, and then we would bird watch in like northeastern Pennsylvania as well, and the differences were astounding, to the bird songs and all of that stuff. But like most of the bird song here is I haven't heard before. Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah. Do it. Do it. I am like I got to get back in shape, and so over the next 6 weeks, I think I'm gonna lose like 20 pounds and like change the way I eat and all of that stuff. So maybe on my personal TikTok, I'll let people follow along with that. I don't know yet. We'll see. Yeah. Yeah, no, I did put on like some extra weight. I used to always weigh about 190 no matter what. So now I'm at like 208. So I'm not really trying to let that get out of control. Like I want to nip that in the butt before it gets crazy. And I've always had high cholesterol, so it's like a genetic thing, which sucks. So I want to take that as well. I'm 40, so after I'm 43. So once you start approaching 50, that's when everything gets serious. So I want to get ahead of that before things get serious. So we shall. I was never, I mean, I don't know if I will. I was never a big holiday person. like my wife just reminded me literally yesterday that like Christmas is coming. Like I, it's not one of our traditions, and so I was never really a big holiday person. Um, in the U.S., trying to think, New Year's. You know, we kind of would celebrate New Year's. Juneteenth. We celebrated Juneteenth before it was a thing. So Juneteenth we would always celebrate. I'm trying to think of what else. We didn't really do Fourth of July. Um, I can't think of another holiday that we really celebrated. Like maybe my mom and dad did something with Valentine's Day, maybe for the sake of romance. But yeah, we didn't. You know what I mean? When my mom died when I was young, and then eventually my dad remarried. So the other family did a lot of like Thanksgiving and like Easter and like all of that stuff. But we not really. It's not really a tradition of ours. So I probably he won't. Maybe he'll probably Juneteenth and New Year's. I guess those are probably the two that he'll like see, you know, us do something with. But as far as like other like he ain't gonna know what Labor Day is, you know what I mean? Like other US holidays, probably not so much. Even me, I was trying to do something, was it the day before? Maybe the day of. Like I was trying to do something on Thanksgiving and I'm like calling the United States. I'm like, how come nobody's answering? And then finally one of like the messages was like, we're closed for the holiday until I was like, oh right. So I didn't even it wasn't even on my radar. We didn't even do like on the business page, which is actually the social media manager's fault. But on our business pages, we weren't even like, "Oh, happy Thanksgiving" from you know. So some of that stuff just goes over our head. We definitely do Indigenous Peoples Day, though. I mean, if you go back in time and look at all our business profiles, we don't do Thanksgiving anyway. So there's that. How do I make sure he doesn't lose the African American culture? That's interesting. Well, that would have to be African American holidays then. And so Juneteenth, he would have, like I said, that's probably one of the ones he would actually get, right? But American holidays aren't necessarily African American culture, you know, at least not from my point of view, not from like the Philadelphia point of view. See, and I think sometimes it depends on what subculture you're from. Like if you're Geechee, I bet there's a whole bunch of like African American stuff. Like if you're from, you know, Charleston and you're Gullah Geechee or something like that, there's probably a whole bunch of stuff down there. But if you're from the north, like if you're, you know, you're black from Detroit, you know, or you're black from Philly. Harlem has its own little Harlem Renaissance thing, so there might be something special going on there. But you're black from Boston, I'm not sure. I mean, what's the culture? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure there's too many specific things for him to lose per se. Like understanding, you know, the history of Juneteenth would definitely put him in touch with how America treated us over the years. Um, I mean, the music is still there, you know what I mean? So whether it's hip hop, R&B, even gospel, or whatever, like the music would still be in the house. So I don't see him losing that. The recipes are still in the house, you know. So like any food that might be associated are still there. So I feel like our culture we carry in our house. You know what I mean? Almost like the same thing that like Jewish culture. They carry it in their house. You know what I mean? Same thing with the Italian Americans. You know what I mean? Like they carry it like in their house. You know what I mean? So I feel like he'll still have a significant, you know, portion of the culture. MLK Day, yes. We never really did Kwanzaa all like that. I think he'll laugh about Black History Month, but he'll know about it because I think he'll have Black History every month. Like he's not living in America, so I don't think he'll probably wonder why it's necessary, you know. But but I mean he would know about it. But MLK, yeah, of course. Um, I don't know about Kwanzaa though. We never really did Kwanzaa in my house, so that might not be a tradition, you know, that our people pass. I wouldn't even know like we never lit the candles and all that stuff. You know, I know they exist, and you know I know roughly how it works, but we've never actually done it. Yeah, there just wasn't a whole lot of holiday stuff. In my, you would have thought we were Jehovah's Witness or something. I don't, we're not, but there just wasn't a lot of holiday stuff in my household. If it wasn't for like not having to go to school, which that didn't happen with Kwanzaa, so if it wasn't for not having to go to school, I probably wouldn't have known about many of the holidays. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like our culture is concentrated in like the arts, culinary arts, you know, visual arts, art like painting arts, you know, crafts and arts as far as carpentry and stuff like that. Like I feel like a lot of our stuff is kind of focused in that, which he would have access to. I'm used to showing my daughter a black Santa. Haven't found one here. Yeah, see, we were never like I don't know. I'm not sure like why. And obviously, my mom has passed and my dad has passed, so I guess you know I'm not in a position to ask. But that stuff, my mom and dad were anti like white lie, you know, and so like I always knew there was no Santa. I always knew there was no Easter bunny. I always knew there was no tooth fairy. Like I all like those things we didn't engage with. So like I laughed at Santa regardless of what color he was. Like he didn't matter to me in any way, shape, or form. He was a fairy tale. And so I would assume my son is probably going to be in the same boat because I don't really know any other way to do it. You know what I mean? But I think culturally, I think I would miss my Cadillac. Nah, you can have a Cadillac. You can have a Cadillac. Do you build, buy, or rent? What did you do for housing and why? We built. It just didn't make sense to pay rent forever for us. Some people rent makes sense. You know what I mean? A lot of people like, oh, you throw your money away, you rent it. That's not true. If it makes sense, do it. For us, it was build. We just wanted the freedom of not having any bills anymore. So if you build in the right place, there's no property tax, there's no electric bill, there's no trash bill, there's no sewage bill, there's no water bill, there's no, you know, you build and you're essentially done, at least for now, unless they change, you know, the laws. But for now, if you pick the right piece of land in the right place, you would build once and then that would be the end of it. You wouldn't have to do anything ever again. So, I mean, maintenance on your house or whatever, but, you know, you would have freedom. So that's what we choose. 9 months, 9 months to build. Benefits of rent. So it depends on like what you got going on, right? But there could be benefits in renting. We've had folks like when we like so we do the whole generational wealth trust fund thing, right? Some people, they make one payment in the trust fund, and that payment compounds for the next 60 years, and that's the end of it. That's called a non-grantor trust. If you insist on making payments to the trust, which is a good idea, it makes the trust compound faster. It puts more assets in the trust for the next generation, so on and so forth. But if you insist on putting U.S. assets in the trust, it becomes what's called a grantor trust. When you have a grantor trust, you have to report everything to the IRS. When you have a non-grantor trust, you don't, right? Until there's a distribution to a U.S. citizen. So if it's a generational wealth trust and there's not going to be any distributions for the next 30 years, you're beautiful. You don't have to make any, kind of reports to the United States for the next 30 years, right? So but there are some people that are like, no, I need to like build this trust quickly. Maybe I'm older. Maybe I can't wait for 30 years to ensure that my kids are okay. Like I need to make payments monthly. I need to build this trust and let's go. Right. And so for people who are really serious about stuff like that, sometimes it makes sense for them to rent and invest the rest. Right. So a lot of times they'll actually do that. Like they'll rent and they'll be like, okay, maybe my mortgage might have been slightly lower than the rent, but my taxes take me above the rent, right? So my overall expenditure is way more if I own than if I rent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay, higher than my mortgage and rent, but I'm going to have no taxes. Maybe my utilities are included in my rent. So like I just got rid of my electric bill and my gas bill and all of that, and I'm going to take the difference and throw it in the trust for it to compound, right? So some people will strategize that way and make something happen. How did I say what? Oh, you're going to the name of the live. How did it save me? Okay. That was a little bit random from my point of view, but I understand. I understand. It made sense from yours. So, on one of the live streams here, I was like, wait, what is he talking about? We've been live for 2 hours. So, on one of the live streams, the name is Moving to Kenya Save Me, I think. I think that's the name of the TikTok live. So someone came in and was like, how did it save you? So for me personally, I was doing all right in Philly. If you saw like the money I was making, you'd be like, oh yeah, you're doing great. But I was still paycheck to paycheck. I was literally one paycheck away from like being at K&A, right? K&A is the Philadelphia version of Skid Row, right? You go to Kensington and Allegheny, and it's tents in the middle of the street, people bent over and nodding, and it's crazy, right? In the street, like cars can't drive. You got to go around. It's really nuts. Google it. Kensington Beach, some people call it. Kensington and Allegheny, K&A, Philadelphia. It's nuts. All right. So, but minus the addict side, right? Obviously, you don't have to do, narcotics just because you run out of money. But I was always one paycheck away from being homeless, and I made good money. You know, so it was like, what's going on? I got a successful business. I'm not, you know, bougie. I don't buy any name brand. I don't own a pair of Jordans. You know what I mean? All of that was nonsense to me. I don't even like sports because to me, I'm not feeding into any machine that's paying a basketball player $30 million while Kensington and Allegheny exists. You know what I'm saying? Like we can't get rid of those homeless people, but we can pay one point guard 30 million a year. Like, come on, can he make 1 million a year and we go handle something? You know what I mean? It's like none of that makes sense to me, and I don't even engage in none of that. Right? Last Super Bowl I saw, the Washington Redskins won, and the quarterback for the Washington Redskins was black. Right? So that'll let you know how long I have not been involved in sports. Right? So I just don't play with any of that nonsense. So, and I was still paycheck to paycheck. So it's not like I was popping bottles every night. It's not like I had a Rolls Royce. It's not like I had some ridiculous Jordan collection. Like, no, I was living frugally. I had a professional business that was making money. I was bringing in over 6 figures, but like my parking space in downtown Philadelphia was $30,000 a year. Like it was ridiculous, right? And so I literally moved to Kenya and was a millionaire in a year. Like the year after I moved here, I was good, And then we did bond laddering, right? And so by doing the bond laddering, the government is making a payment to me on the money it borrowed from me, paying me interest every month, right? So the government's paying me interest every month for the next 20 years. So I don't, if everything stops, if I never sell another thing, if my business never does another deal, I'm good. So that put me in a state of I just don't care. As far as people interjecting in my peace. If you bother me, right, you mess up my peace, you're done. I don't care who you are. I don't care, what business deal you might have brought. I don't care how much money you have. I do not care, right? So that allowed me to be in that position of fu, right? And so I mean, not you can't do that in every country, right? Like, you can't do that in Nigeria. Foreigners can't buy government bonds in Nigeria. Oh, how'd you buy a government bond as a foreigner? Yeah, the country, right? You pick the right country, right? So you make sure that you pick a country where you can buy a government bond, and as a foreigner, and so on and so forth. So it's just about doing the due diligence, finding the right country, picking the right country, having a good strategy, rocking out with the strategy, and that's it. Just like where you are in Kenya, we have Kibera and oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, everybody does. You know what I mean? Like I said, in Philly, we have and for real, look up Kensington and Allegheny. Look up Kensington Beach, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. Kibera is like a rich place compared to Kensington and Allegheny. When you walk through Kibera, people are living their lives and they're doing their thing. You walk through Kensington and Allegheny, people are bent over backwards like a horror movie. It looks like their back should break because they're high on like drugs you've never heard of. Like they're doing stuff. There was something called crocodile that they were doing, and it literally turned your skin into like crocodile scales. It was crazy. They were doing these bath salts that were making them eat people like zombies. They're on meth. They're all kinds of crazy stuff. It's nuts. Look it up. You would never walk through Kensington and Allegheny, and you would walk right through Kibera. So it's a different thing, right? But yeah, I mean, if you got a plan, you can definitely, make it. It doesn't have to be Kenya. Kenya might not be your place. Kenya has been my place, and for my clients, Kenya has worked out really, really well. But people relocate all over the place. You know what I mean? So you can definitely find a place, that works for you. Take us through how did you have to register? No, 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 no. I don't do business in Kenya, right? So like I don't do business in Kenya yet. I will in the future, but my company is in the United States right now. I employ businesses in Kenya, right? So I have an entire network of businesses that even we own as shareholders. I'm not a managing director, so I don't physically do any work, but I buy shares, in Kenyan business. So we own like a law firm here, and the lawyers, the advocates are the partners that operate the law firm. We're just shareholders. We own a general contracting firm here. We own an architecture firm here. So like, we sit as shareholders on the board, which is fine and perfectly legal. But if I wanted to operate, then I just have to go get a investor permit, right? Which a lot of my clients from the United States get investor permits out here and do that. But for me, that just wasn't part of my plan. So I'm asking how you bought the bond through the Central Bank of Kenya. Yeah, you just through the Central Bank of Kenya. You don't need to be a Kenyan to buy a bond. Go to the Central Bank of Kenya right now. It'll ask you. It'll ask you if you're a foreigner or if you're a local. Right? Go to what is it? DHOW CSD app. You go to the DHOW CSD app and you make an account. And while you're making an account, it'll ask you if you're a Kenyan. If you're a Kenyan, it'll ask you for a KRA pin. If you're not a Kenyan, it'll ask you for a passport number. Yeah, you don't need to be a Kenyan to buy a bond. But that's not every country. That's part of why we choose Kenya. In Nigeria, you can't buy even Nigerians can't buy a bond. And you can't buy a bond as an individual. You can only buy a bond as a brokerage company, right? So like you got to choose the right country. How and where can we connect with you more? All of these accounts, except for the fan base live, all of these other lives are on business accounts. So you can just go to the profile and you'll get like an email or a website to my US business. But that makes it pricey when you put in why? The price of the bond doesn't change. The price of the bond is set by the government. There's nothing more pricey about being a foreign investor. The price of the bond is set by the government, and the price of the ROI on the bond is set by the government. It's not a stock, right? So like you can't pump the price of the stock as a foreigner just because you're a foreigner and maybe you're using dollars or euros or something like that. It's a bond. So the price is set, the term is set, the interest is set. You can't influence anything unless you're requesting a discount, in which case you have to do a minimum 50 million. And then, but that's something that anybody can do. And most of the people who do that are Kenyan. They're Kenyan institutional buyers that are doing a minimum 50 million in bond coupon purchases. And then it's called, what is it called? I can't remember the name because I never do it. But you can do a competitive bid. So when you're buying the bond, it'll ask, is it a competitive bid or are you just a standard bidder? And if you click competitive bid, it's a minimum 50 million shillings. And then that's it. I had to buy using my Kenyan ID, way different amount and charge. No, that's not true. Maybe you're thinking of something different. Maybe we're talking about two different things. Yeah, maybe we're talking about two different things. A treasury bond, a Kenyan treasury bond. They release, as a matter of fact, I just showed, hold on, let me show it again. A Kenyan treasury bond is released by the government. There is no difference. I don't know if it'll keep the old photo now, so I got to go dig the photo back up. But a Kenyan treasury bond is going to be released by the Kenyan government, and the prospectus is released every month on the bond. It does not change. You cannot change the price. It's a locked in price. There's a locked in amount of years, and there's a locked in rate of return. There's nothing you can do to change the price unless you're an institutional investor and you do a competitive bid. And all that changes is your discount, right? So if you do a competitive bid at 50 million or more, it'll change your discount on the bond. But once you buy the bond, it's the same interest rate, it's the same price, it's the same term. Those things cannot change by law. So maybe you're talking about corporate bonds, like the Safaricom bond or something like that, but government bonds, it doesn't matter who you are. It's the exact same rates. Any treasury bond, you can't change the rates. You can only change the discount. Yeah, no, yeah, you can go central bank and check it out right now. The prospectus is up. You can't change the rates. It doesn't matter who you are. Now, if you're talking about funds, that's different. Like if you're talking about like Mansa X or like Oak Special Fund, there's a USD Oak Special Fund and it's a different price than the Kenya Shilling Oak Special Fund, and you get different ROI. So like the Kenya Shilling, right. Okay, yeah, that's different. So like the Kenyan Shilling Oak Special Fund, you get 20% ROI on that. If you get the USD Oak Special Fund, it's like 8% ROI on that. So like if you're doing those kind of funds, but so that's for later, right? For our folks who want to be able to live here and be cool, they get treasury bonds that cover their basic income, right? So what they'll do is they'll ladder the treasury bonds and they'll typically buy 1 million shillings of 6 bonds. And then those 6 bonds pay out twice a year. So treasury bonds pay out every 6 months. So if you buy a treasury bond in February, it pays out in January and June, right? Typically, right? So what you do is you ladder that so that every single month you get a payout. right? And then that's guaranteed for the next 20 years. Like you buy a 20-year bond every month, right? And so you get your 10% or your the best that they ever had was the Kenyan tax exempt infrastructure bond. The infrastructure bond of February 2024 was 18.46%. That's amazing, right? That's double the S&P 500. So that was the best one we've ever seen. But you buy whatever makes sense for you 6 times, it pays out all 12 months, and then boom, you're covered on your basic needs for the next 20 years. Then you can start playing with the MMF. Then you can start playing with, all of that stuff, and get extra money, but extra risk. You might lose your investment as well, right? So then you can start playing with the riskier stuff. But the base investment is just those bonds. Because once you're living here on the bonds, then you have like, you either have a ordinary residency permit, a investor permit. You might have an NGO permit depending on what you're doing, but you got a permit. Once you got a permit, you got a KRA pin, and you have a foreigner certificate, right? So with the foreigner certificate, you can access e-citizen. So once you're here living off the bonds, then you get all the other stuff, and then you can invest in money market funds and IFTs and all of that stuff. So but yeah, those might have different prices if you get involved in the USD side versus the Kenyan shilling side. Yeah. The bonds are just. Don't get it twisted. There are some people who have a really low risk tolerance, so they never stop buying bonds. They only buy bonds, right? Because they don't want to lose their money. So there, and currently in Kenya, the bond interest rates are amazing. Most bonds have a better ROI than the S&P 500. So you do better buying a Kenyan bond than you would following the U.S. markets currently, right? That will change. Eventually, the bond interest rates will go down. But for right now, the bond interest rates are amazing. So a lot of people they just buy the bonds. But if next year the bond interest rates go down and you bought this year's bonds, your interest rate does not change until the bond is done. So you're going to get that higher interest rate until the end of that bond cycle. So that's why people are buying big now. Most of the auctions oversell. So if the Kenyan government's like, all right, we're looking for 20 billion shillings in, October's auction, they normally get 40 billion. You know what I mean? And so then they have to decide whether they're going to go ahead and reject certain bids or whether they're just going to accept extra money and give everybody the bond coupon. And they've done both. You know. Do you think rates will change once the UN? No, the UN's always been here. So I know from like our point of view with that move that they made where they relocated an entire division from New York to Nairobi, it looks like, they're just arriving now. But no, they've always been here. They're just consolidating some of their like for the refugee program. Nairobi is actually the UN headquarters for that particular branch of UN, right? So they're just consolidating that. So yeah, it won't change because of that. The bond rates remain high if there's a high demand for cash. So as long as there's a high demand for cash, the bond rates will remain high. When the demand for cash, reduces, that's when the bond rates will go ahead and reduce. So I would estimate that there's probably another 5 years of like half decent rates. But for us, we like them to be over 10%. If they're not over 10%, it might make sense to just follow the S&P 500. So that might only be a year or two away, right? Because at 8% on a bond is still a great interest rate, right? But right now, the interest rates are incredible. They're not just great, they're incredible. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's the exact same theory that most Americans are putting into their 401k, right? It's just that you can do it here for about 75,000, 75 to 85,000, and stacking those bonds, you get two bites of the apple, right? Because remember, it's every 6 months, right? So if you miss the, the first one, or not that you miss it, but if you see the interest rates on, that February bond, right? So you're looking at the February bond offering and you're like, ugh, it's 10.6 and 11.1%. I just don't like that. Well, now you get another bite of the apple in August, right? Or in July, right? Because if you buy in July, then the month before that is June, and then the 6 months from that is going to be January again, right? So you get one more bite at the apple to still close your ladder gap, so that you get a payment, every month. But the risk with that is, what if the interest rates are even worse in July? So it becomes, a call that you have to make your best guess. But you get two bites of the apple if you want to get it all done in 1 year. And then after that, most of your bonds should be about the same amount of time. Last month there was like a 25-year, which is like a little bit longer than the standard 20-year, but it was a reopening. So there's only 21 years left. So that was still about 20 years. So it didn't upset things too much. And then typically halfway in, they pay you back half of your money. That's why we use a million. That's why a million is you can buy 50,000 in bonds. You don't have to buy a million. But if you do that, when the bond halves, they'll give you all your money back and you'll be out of the bond, right? So you have to figure something else out. Halfway through the bond, anyone who has a million or more, they'll give you half your money back and you can stay in the bond until the end, right? So it just makes it, that you get that interest rate for longer. If it so happens that 10 years in, there are actually better rates, then cool. You got half your money back and you reinvest and you get the better rates for the next 20 years, you're good to go. That probably will not be the case. What will probably happen is, in 10 years, the coupon rates on a bond is going to be like 6%, right? So you're going to be really happy that you're still getting, 14, 15% for, 10 more years. And then by the end of that, you should have other investments and other savings and own property and, Airbnbs and whatever it is that you're doing, to make up for the loss of this 20 years of passive income that you were granted. I would. I definitely would. I'd at least start, because what you're going to want, you really want to start as soon as possible, because you got to get through all six purchases, right? Without the bond market bottoming out, because it's going to stop, and it's going to happen. Eventually, we'll get to that point where somebody's in, they got 4 out of their 6 bonds, and then the bottom drops. So once that bottom drops out, that means there's going to be, if there's 2 more, to get to 6, that means there's going to be 4 payments a year that are lighter than all the rest. Now, of course, you can manage that. You just got planning, right? So of course you can manage that, or you come in and spend more money or whatever because you're already more than halfway through the process. So you're going to want to finish it, but maybe on those last 4, you do 2 million instead of 1 million or whatever, which would change your overall price, right? But that's going to happen. There's going to be a group of clients that are buying their bonds, and the bottom's going to fall out in the middle of them doing it. So waiting is definitely not part of the plan when it comes to this, because this is a special situation. Like, if you just Google how bonds work, typically they're the safest investment, but they give you the lowest ROI. Currently in this market, it's still the safest investment, but you're getting better ROI than the S&P 500. So that's crazy. You know what I mean? So like, now is definitely the time to do it. And the longer you wait, the closer you get to it just not existing anymore. Mm-hmm. Yep, that would do it right now. Yep. You'd be completely, and again, there's always that chance that 4 or 5 months into it, we hit the decline. But, currently at the interest rates that are currently being, presented, yeah, you'd be set for life. Well, you get those payments for life. Obviously, you could overspend, right? So obviously, if you're bad at budgeting, even with these government checks that you're getting every month, you could burn through it. But if you discipline yourself, yeah, that would be your base for life. So we shall see. But right now it's looking pretty good. And I I would assume that we're safe until the next election. Because I don't think this president wants to run a reelection campaign, bond rates bottoming out, where his competitors can say, hey, look at that. 2 years ago, when he came into office, it was 18%, right? And now it's 8%. What did he do? Did he got, So I think that people are fairly safe until then, but that's a guess. That is a guess. That is not backed up by any data. That is not any kind of legitimate, bond advice or investment advice or anything like that. That's a guess. I'm guessing that even if they have to do it artificially, they will make sure it still looks good until the next election. But you never know. I'm actually also thinking that they'll reopen the 18.46% tax exempt infrastructure bond right before the election as well. I'm thinking that they're going to open that back up just so people can get a taste of that and feel good about the current government. Because people who are interested in investing and stuff like that are the people who vote. You know what I mean? Like I'll be Kenyan by the end of next year. My application is actually already in. I've been married to a Kenyan for more than 7 years. I qualify, so I'll be Kenyan by the end of next year, and then I'm able to vote and stuff like that. Um, but I don't have any political leanings at the moment. But people who are investing are people who vote. So it makes sense for him to just make sure that that investment, landscape is real, real good until his reelection campaign is done. About which bond? Trying to get this one house sold. I heard that. I know how that is. Kenya will always be good. I mean, in my outlook, yeah. But capital markets do what capital markets do. It's unsustainable for bonds to stay at this rate. It happens, but there's a very specific reason why it happens. And so when stocks go up, bonds go down. And so as the Nairobi Stock Exchange matures, that also will affect the bond rate. I'm just assuming, right? I have no inside information. I'm just assuming that Ruto will order central bank to reopen the tax exempt infrastructure bond that's at 18.46% before his reelection, because people who invest vote. So he's gonna give the people a taste of my government's so great, reelect me, let me stay in office, blah 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 blah. So I'm assuming that we might get a reopening of that bond by then, but I have no idea if that's actually gonna happen or not. This year there was only one infrastructure bond, and all of my clients bought it, but there was only one infrastructure bond this year. I even bought it myself, right? So that's a tax exempt bond, but so the rest of the bonds that were bought have a capital gains coupon attached. But you don't. It's not like you pay the taxes. They send you a tax compliance certificate at the end of the year that shows that the tax for that was already paid inside of the investment, right? So it's not like you got to cut a check to anybody. You just don't get the full ROI because part of it is withheld for taxes, and it's a final tax, so it's not a big deal. What's the lowest you can invest? I mean, the lowest you can invest is what is that? $380, 50,000 shillings. That's the lowest you can invest. But that ain't gonna cover, like, so the point of bond laddering is to cover your basic expenses, right? So if you're doing that, so that we start that at 1 million to cover basic expenses. But I mean, if you just want like a small investment or something like that, the lowest you can invest is 50,000, but that ain't gonna cover any kind of basic living expenses or anything like that. See, our director of immigration law just popped in. Maybe she'll hop up. On the lowest, the return's the same, right? So, like if it's 10%, if 10% is the interest rate on the bond, no matter how much of it you buy, it's 10%, right? So the percentage is going to be the same. It's just the buying power of it is going to be diminished based on how much you how much you put into that bond. So if it's 1 million, 10% is 100,000, right? And then they pay out twice a month, so you're getting 50,000 shillings a month. You're the same amount that you put in, right? Um, so what we typically are looking for is we're looking for folks to be living at or around 60, 70,000 shillings a month, and then they're getting that check every month from the government. That's like your basic expenses. If you own your house and you don't have to pay electric and you don't have to pay water and you don't have to pay land rates, because if it's agricultural land until they change the law, there's no land taxes and stuff like that. So that's based on somebody who's like, all right, I can get by on 50, 60, 70,000 a month, right? So then we can come in and we can say, okay, cool, we'll put it 1 million, you'll get paid twice, so at the lowest interest rate that we like to see, which is 10%, that's 50,000 a month, for the next 20 years. You're good. You know what I mean? Folks who are like, wait a minute, I'm a little bit bougie. Typically, if you got that kind of lifestyle going on, you got the money to back it up. So if you need double that, then we do double, right? And it's not exactly like double 75. There's some economy of scale stuff that happens there. But you put in double and you were doing 2 million, per bond, and then now you're looking at, okay, instead of 100,000 on 10%, if it's 2 million, it's 200,000, right? So now I'm actually getting 100,000 a month. There's nobody who can't live on that, right? So you're getting 1.2 million a year off the bond. You know what I mean, for the next 20 years. So it just depends on, like, what you decide you need for your lifestyle. But the minimum is that 75. That 75 that Right Vision was talking about. Jolene, you not coming up? You're killing my dream. No, I mean, you can definitely do that. You can definitely do that. I remember the first bond that I didn't even buy a bond first. I bought a bill first, which are bills are short term. And I think I did exactly what you just mentioned. Like, I bought the minimum, I bought a bill, which is the maximum on a bill is 1 year, so you don't make much of any dang thing. And just to see how it worked, So I bought a bill, a 1 year bill. It paid me. Did it pay me twice? I feel like with the 1 year bill, they just pay you once. Like, they just pay you your interest plus whatever at the end. I think. No, they do pay you twice. At 6 months you get paid, and then at the end you get paid plus your principal, and you get your tax withholding certificate. So I just wanted to see like how it worked. And yeah, they just spit the money into your account. You get a little text message talking about there's been a change. What is it? It's how do they say it? It's like there's been a change in your status, right? There's a change in your status is being processed or something like that. Then 3 days later, boom, there's a bunch of money that gets dropped into your bank account, and then that's it. So and there's never been a default that I'm aware of. They've never not paid. You know what I mean? So it's been a good time. So yeah, you can invest any amount that you want. But when we're talking about bond laddering, as far as people being able to not have to ever work again, and taking care of themselves and their relocation that way, there is a minimum that you need to implement. Jolene, are you on your way to the office? Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, and yeah, the guy who was talking about the 401k thing, it's the same thing. You just get to retire right away. That's all. If you want to, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about money. It changes. It changes everything. It changes everything. You can live off of 4.99 a month. Yeah, so I mean, so that's essentially that would be you right around that minimum point because you get 50,000 shillings a month at that bare minimum. Now, you actually get more than that. I'm saying that because that's the minimum that we like to see on a bond. I haven't actually seen a bond that only pays 10%, right? 10% our kind of minimum on the program, right? So most of the bonds that people are getting have been closer to 13% than 10%. So if that's the case, you're talking about 60,000 shillings a month, which is exactly what you just quoted. So typically people who are doing the minimum, that's exactly like what they're getting. But you definitely don't want to live here thinking about US dollars. You will mess yourself up. Like if you're thinking about like, oh, that's only $5, oh, that's only $10, you mess yourself up. You want to get in the mindset of like, this is 60,000 shillings. What can 60,000 shillings do? And now let me live in that mindset because that'll keep you straight. Because for your daily stuff, the numbers are almost the same. Like for your daily stuff, 60,000 almost spends like 60,000, right? Now for your non-daily stuff, like 60,000 can buy you a car in the United States, right? 60,000 ain't buying you no car here. So for your non-daily stuff, there's a bit of a conversion going on where it's essentially the same. You need a couple million, to buy a car, which would translate into, the same amount of money it costs to buy a car in the United States, right? So when it's an import and it's not being, manufactured here, imports don't change in price. The price is set by whoever you're importing from, the Japanese or whoever, right? So imports are one thing, but we're talking about like your daily, like your food, like your produce, like the stuff that's manufactured here. If when you got 60,000, it spends the 60,000 for those things. So you got to get your mindset in that. How much would one invest to get approximately 130k shillings per month? You would probably need, let me think, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100. Actually, wow, that number does kind of match up, doesn't it? Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 130,000 dollars. You wouldn't need 150. It's not double the 75. There's some economy of scale things that happen because some of the payment stuff ends up being like brokerage fees and all of that. So if you're just paying more, the brokerage fee, isn't doubled by that. You know what I mean? So it's not double 75. So it's not like 150. So it'd probably be around 130, maybe 125,000, and then that would pay you out, for around the next 20 years. Like I said, last month it was 21 years was the high one, right? Some months the high one is only 18, years, and there's nothing we can do about that other than skip and hope that we get a better thing, 6 months down the line. So and if we've already skipped, then it's like, all right, either we got to do it or you're going to be off in your years anyway if we wait till next year to do it. So those are like the little things that like can't be guaranteed because we never know what bond they're spitting out next. But yeah, right around like 125, would put you in that category. And I don't know I don't spend that a month. I don't know anybody who couldn't live off of that a month. And I got a full household staff. So maybe I might spend around 100 total, maybe 110, but I definitely don't spend 130. And I eat out a lot. So if I cut back on the amount of eating out I do, that's probably another 25,000 right there. I just took it out. Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I mean, you're paying 60 bob for a tuk tuk. You know what I mean? So yeah, you can definitely live on that. Just depends on where you are and how bougie you are. My only regret is I did not know about this when I was. I'm with you 100%. 100%. Now, the other thing is there might not even been a bond market back then. I don't know when they started. You know what I mean? So there's that, right? But I definitely wish like I knew about it the first year it was available, 100% on that. But that's always, there'll be more of that the older we get. Hindsight's always 2020. There's a like so beachfront property here is like an eighth of an acre beachfront is probably 270,000 US dollars, right? And 30 years ago, which well, I'd have been 13, but 30 years ago though, I could have bought an eighth of an acre at the beach for $10,000. So yeah, man. Even then, I would have found the way. You know what I mean? Like you can put yourself, you can put your brain back in your younger body, even if you're underage. You can figure it out. The hindsight's always 2020. Yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's 60 bob a ride, local. Typically, especially on the coast, if you're not local, it's like 100. Yeah, yeah. How about it? What was my first car? It was a Cadillac. It was a what was it called? A LaSalle. It had this like curved trunk with a spare tire on it, and it was old. I mean, it was my first car. I wasn't like balling at 18. So, it was maybe it was 10, 15 years old then. But yeah, it definitely was a Cadillac. I remember when I moved to China and Buick was like their Cadillac. I guess because Mao, like the first, I don't know what he was, president, premier, I don't know, but the first like ruler of modern communist China or whatever, he drove a Buick, So because he had like a Buick, it made Buick, the Cadillac of China at the time. And then 16 short years later, they got all these crazy BYD cars. I was just there last month. They got all these wild cars now. Like, Buick is no longer it. And I guess they really didn't, they didn't capitalize on it because they should still be, they should be keeping up with the local, cars. But yeah, yeah. I like Lincoln a lot. So I was around, the Navigator and all that stuff. So it was either Navigator or Escalade, you know what I mean? And I was Team Navigator. I actually liked the Aviator quite a bit more than the Navigator. And then I grew up. Then I was like, I think I had 4 or 5 Kias. So I had 2 Kia Optimas. Um, and then there was the LeBron James K900, and I was like eyeing it, but I didn't do it. And then I got a Sedona, and then the Telluride came out, and I love that car. Kia Telluride was my last U.S. car. So yeah, us and our nonsense with depreciating assets. Unfortunately, though, you're correct. That's what our fathers taught us. Ah, Rio, yeah. I hear that. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Oh man. All right. All right. So it has been 2.5 hours. Any other questions for me on any of this? Any sign of e-vehicle? Yeah, 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 yeah. Plenty of signs. Plenty of signs. There's plenty of e-vehicles in Kenya. The I don't know why, but the Kenyan e-vehicle is lease only. I don't know why they did that. So I highly doubt they're going to take off because you can't buy them. Um, but then there's what is it? I think there's Kia e-vehicles here. I'm trying to remember what other e-vehicles are here. Um, I don't think the Chinese EVs are here. The Chinese just broke into the market with the Cherries, but they're not EVs. So Cherry, which is a Chinese company, is now being sold here, or they're about to be sold here, like in January. But they're not EVs. Renault doesn't have any EVs, but they're in the market here. There might be a Toyota EV. Um, it's one of those where you can plug in. I think all that like that's why Tesla isn't big here. Somebody did import a Tesla, and then I guess they had to import like the home charging system that you can buy when you buy a Tesla. Um, and it was like in the news because I guess they were trying to figure out how to do the import tax because the import taxes were based on uh, like the horsepower and all of that, right? So what you don't get with an e-vehicle. So we're trying to figure out how to convert it. But that's the only Tesla I know of that's out here, and I guess he has a home charging system, so he got to get home. So that's a problem. Um, but I think it's like a cable that can plug into the wall, which means that it's probably not fast. So there's that. But there's a bunch of hybrids though. Those are doing okay. Maybe in Nairobi there's a bunch of charging stations. I don't know. But they're here. They're definitely here. Yeah. Yeah, no, I never messed with them, but yeah, I could imagine. I could imagine, but they are here. I know. Interestingly enough, like when I lived in China, EVs weren't a thing, but Chinese taxis actually ran on natural gas, which was interesting. So when they filled the car up, they would go to like a gas station, but when they filled the car up, they actually had to pop their hood, and there was a nozzle that looked like the air nozzle on your tire somewhere in like their engine, and they would connect to that and fill it with natural gas, which that was really really interesting. This last time I went back to China, I didn't see much of that, because there's so many EVs. And it's cool. Like they incentivize it, I guess. There might be tax incentives. You get a different license plate, so you can just look at a car and know that it's an EV. But the one thing that was interesting to me was the lack of noise. Like there was an EV, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was an American EV, and it didn't like the company didn't take off, but it looked like a sports car, but it had speakers where the exhaust would be, and it like played noise, right? It's like when you hit the acceleration, it would like it make noise. So we were in China, and the one thing that we kept noticing was like there'd be a car coming, and we'd be about to step out in the street, and we wouldn't hear anything. So we'd be about to like step in front of a car because they were electronic. You couldn't hear them coming at all. They didn't make any noise. So that's interesting. They're probably going to have to do something about that. Like it's probably going to have to make some kind of noise. Fisker, maybe it was a Fisker. Maybe it was. I can't remember what it was, but it looked damn good. Like it was a real handsome car. It looked like it was like a Lamborghini or something. It looked really really nice. But they had these little speakers, and it would actually make the noise so that you could hear the car accelerating and stuff. They need more EVs in Nairobi. There was the same thing in China. When I lived in China, there were like smog days. Like you would get a smog alert and like have to wear a mask to go out the house. And this time, when I just went back last month, none of that was going on because there's just so many EVs that there was no smog. So that was really really cool. So it definitely showed what's possible. Yes, 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 yes. I think it is that. I think when I was questioning it, I was getting that karma more than the Fisker. But I think you're right. I think that's exactly what it is. But it didn't do well. I think they were trying to compete with like the the Tesla like Roadster, like that first Tesla, and they just didn't get the money behind them. But it was smart with the noise. And there's a lot of like EV scooters in China, and scooters are like allowed to drive on the sidewalk versus like them being like a vehicle that have to drive in the street. So that was another thing. Like they'd be behind you, and you wouldn't hear anything until they blew their horn. So the noise thing, they're gonna have to figure out the noise thing, especially in a world where people are looking at their phones all day. When I first lived in China, it wasn't like that. Like I had a Droid 2 Global when I lived in China, which was like an Android phone that looked kind of like a BlackBerry, that you could only get from Verizon. And then I had like the Droid X, like there were no Samsung Galaxies yet or anything like that. So people were not in their phone like that. Like they weren't walking around looking at their phone. But to have cars that don't make any noise while people are walking around looking at, Red Note or TikTok or whatever, yeah, that's going to be a bit of a problem. They're going to have to figure that out. Ah, okay. Okay. Yeah, it was a good looking car though. I was definitely eyeing it up. Yeah, definitely not. Like I react to Nairobi every time I go there. You're definitely right about that vibes. Nairobi is just not. It's not a favorite place of mine anyway. But it's so green out here. Like we get such fresh air everywhere we go out here. It's hot, but it's fresh, and so I go to Nairobi and like my skin reacts. You know what I mean, to the pollution. My it's almost like I get allergies. Like my sinuses react to it, the whole nine. So I don't spend a whole lot of time in Nairobi. Yes, it is. Yep. Yep. It absolutely is vision. Property might be more, but once you get past that, you know, and and not even because we've done property in like Runda, and like we've done property in like places around Nairobi, and the land rates are similar actually. So you're actually probably doing better with land here because at least you're getting land near the beach. But the land rates are actually similar unless you go out in the bush. Like if you go out in the bush, you can get ridiculous land rates, but it's going to take you 2 hours to get to the closest hospital. So and we actually there was actually someone who died. We actually didn't take them on because they were just so price oriented that it was like, look, we're really not the right service provider for you. So, you got to go deal with somebody else. So, I don't know what to tell you. But they were so like penny pincher that it just didn't work for us. It just didn't make any sense. But they did that. They ended up paying shit. What was it? Maybe like $4,000 for a piece of land out in the bush, and then they started like building their house out there, and and they were like, "Yeah, see, I didn't pay all that." Da, 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 da. And they had a medical complication and died, and no one found them for like weeks. Like by the time they found them, it was like really, it was a bad situation. And so when the body got sent back for the funeral and all that, like it had to be closed casket and all of that. So like it's not worth. If you can't afford it, just don't do it. Like it's not worth it for you to and I feel like it was a like an allergic thing. It wasn't even like they would have known because they were they had a medical condition. It was like something stung them, and they had an allergic reaction, and then their throat closed up and they died in the middle of the bush. And then because they were in the middle of the bush, no one found them for like 2 weeks. So by the time they found them, it was a bloated, stinky mess. Like it was not cute. So it, what was the point of that? You know what I mean? So yeah, definitely. If you can't afford it, you just can't afford it. It's okay. You know what I mean? Yeah, I can walk to the hospital. Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely. There's three U.S. class hospitals. There's three private hospitals within walking distance, and then the number one public hospital is on the road where we're building a community right now. So that's walking distance to that community, but they're not walking distance, but they're driving distance to these three private hospitals as well. So there's Diani Beach Hospital, Aga Khan Ukunda Hospital, and what's the other one? Palm Beach Hospital. Yeah. So all three of those are private hospitals with the same level of medicine that anyone watching this would be used to. And then there's Carrefour, which is a supermarket, kind of like Walmart, you could say. There's Nivis, which is same situation. And there's Chandarana, which is the same situation. There's another one called Shri, which is more of like a mom and pop type of grocer type of thing. So there's four grocery stores. There's two or three farmers markets. There's a ton of restaurants, so, you know, or just go to the chemist and wing it. I don't even think there was a chemist. Like they were out in the bush. You know what I mean? Like they were, you know, when you when you're trying to buy land for $2,000, you know what I mean? You're not going to be next to anything. There's not going to be a road that leads to your land. You're going to be bumping up and down on like rock, trying to get to land. It's just not typically what people are looking for. I was really, really sad though. And of course, her family blamed it on, Africa and because they'd never been here or whatever. But yeah, don't do that. Just don't, like, just wait, save up, make sure you can afford it. You know what I mean? Now we have plenty of people who have used safety nets, right? Like maybe they didn't have the cash in hand to afford it, and then they, took loans, and then they tried to pay those loans back, over the course of the next year, and maybe something happened and they couldn't, so they filed bankruptcy. That's different, right? But yeah, don't don't put yourself in a horrific position. Yeah, there's a mall should be built. It's almost done now, but there's a brand new like full size mall that we just built here at Indiana Beach. So now there's how many? One, two, three. There's a Shell station in the mall. So now there's another auto repair station. So I think it's like four, like U.S. style auto repair places. There's a ton of like little home garages, but like with lift, kits and all of that. So now there's another one of those. I'm hoping there's a movie theater coming in that mall. 'Cause that's the only thing that like we don't have right here is a movie theater. Everything else we have. So hopefully there's a movie theater coming in that mall. But some of the what are they called? Some of the like franchise places. So like CJ's is like it's like TGI Fridays. You know what I mean? It's one of those like franchise places. So I think one of those is coming with the mall. Art Cafe. It's kind of like Starbucks. Hopefully, I think one of those is coming with the mall as well. So all the little things that weren't represented here should be here in the next like month or two. Yeah, I like CJ's. Yeah, I definitely like CJ's. You will. You definitely will. That's not a difficult thing to do at all. Might be a little more difficult for vibes. It might be a little more difficult the other way around, but it's definitely not difficult to find a solid wife here at all. I know that's right. Yeah, you get a good one of those, man. Your life changes. You're blessed. You get one good one of those. You're solid. Get a bad one though, it's a nightmare. But you get one good house girl, you're solid. Ah, there you go. Just get a cleaner then. That's all right. Let the cleaner come 3 days a week. You be all right. We did the same thing with the first one. We were like, yeah, it's cool. You do what you do. We'll bring somebody else. Nah. Oh, wait. Physically or inside the place? Oh, okay, inside the place. Yeah, that. It's really, really great that you say that because that's one of the reasons why all of our clients build, right? Because they're like, oh well, why don't I just buy a place? I'm like, you can do that, but the standard of building is not what you expect the standard of building to be. The things that you think will just come with the property do not come with properties here, and so they actually expect you to leave all your windows and doors open, right? That's the mindset of the local build style. And that's why, and you're closed, you don't want mosquitoes, you don't want bugs, and you're closing things, and that's why it's damp. We construct buildings based on like the American theory that you're not going to be keeping everything open and letting all the mosquitoes in the house, that you are going to be closed up. So we actually design things so that, that moisture doesn't build up in the house on the same engineering principles that we would at like the Jersey Shore or Miami Beach and things like that. So yeah, definitely, definitely, that's one of the biggest reasons why people will build because it's like slightly cheaper. You know what I mean? Like it's like nuisancely cheaper. Like you might buy a house for I don't know, 25 million shillings, and then you build it and it's like 20 million. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes from our point of view, it's like, ah, screw it. I just won't wait the 9 months and pay the extra five, and whatever. Uh-uh. You will not. It's the houses aren't even close. The quality of house you'll get from our build, you can't even compare it based on what you want. It's not that the local things are bad. The way that local people live in the culture style, it's fine. You know what I mean? It's just that for you'll end up being uncomfortable like that. Oh, I hear that. Nah, you'll be fine because you'll be able to bring in a full staff. We got dogs. We got a cane corso, two Rottweilers, and a black lab. We got a gardener. We got a security guard, and all of that. Yeah, like, you'd be all right. Because what the difference? Because you stop paying once you build a house. You have no bills other than your internet. And if you don't upgrade to off grid, then your electric bill. So you'll have your token, which you got now, I'm sure, and you'll have your internet bill, right? And then like Netflix and all that other stuff. But those are optional and things that you choose, right? So the what you're paying for rent will turn into your staff to make your life easier and to give you time back. So you already got the house girl, so that'll still be there. Then maybe you'll have a cleaner, you'll have a Masai if you want, or a contract security guard if you want. Then it's up to you whether you need a gardener or any of that type of stuff, and you go from there. That's another big thing here. You're really never by yourself. Even if you don't hire all the whatever, you typically got a village around you somewhere. But yeah, I mean, for people who are relocating, we typically have staff. There's typically 3 or 4 people there, and like I have 2 live-in staff. So the governess lives here, and then there's another staff member that lives here as well. So yeah, you know, you're typically not alone if you don't want to be. All right, all right, all right. Any other questions? Any other questions? There's nothing really going on fan base, but I'm gonna keep going live on it for the culture. We're gonna give it a fair shot. Not a problem. I only drink 1 cup of coffee now per day because my doc said I gotta chill out on the coffee. So apparently it creates oxalates. So I just had that kidney stone surgery, and they analyzed what the kidney stone was made out of and all of that. So like, you don't have oxalates anymore, which is a ton of freaking things. So so yeah, I have 1 coffee a day now. It's crazy. I have an entire barista set up in the house. Like, it's nuts. Anyway. All right, guys. I will talk to you guys later. Thanks for hanging out with me this morning. And I'll see you tomorrow around the same time. All right. Have a great day. You're welcome, Trio.